Where'd Rick go?
There's Jessica. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
Hey, Jessica.
Howdy.
Dueling cameras. So we got Mike, Jim, Ryan. Carlos is here. He's blessed us with his presence. That's good. Okay.
Which side?
Okay.
Over here.
Yeah. Can we substitute somebody for Reb? Yeah. All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Jim Godfrey, for those that might be online that we don't know. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's about 3 after 1. And thank everyone for being here and your time today. And those in the audience, thanks for showing up and having an interest in what we're doing here. Rick, voting members,
Why don't we take roll? Let's see, of the ones I don't see already, do we have Tony?
Jess had her hand, so
No?
who do you see, Jess?
Rick, would you like me to run down the list of the names that Jessica provided me for the in as well as online?
Yes, please.
All right, let me tag Dean on here. I saw him pop in. Okay, so going down the list, so far I can see in person, Scott, Ed, Reb, Jim, Tom, Larry. And then on Zoom, we have Ann, Jim Moore, Jean, Carlos, and Ryan. Is there anybody that snuck in the room or online that I didn't get?
Mr. Richard Robertson.
Mr. Richard Robertson.
And you said Greg Gooding, right?
Greg,
Yeah.
no,
Craig is here as well.
Craig Gooding. Perfect. All right, in person.
So
So that
just to
puts us at
summarize,
12.
we don't have Tony, Karen, Dave Zelenak, Steve Hart, Cindy, Joan, David Chestnut, or Rick Hoover. Is that correct?
That's what I see.
So what are these people doing? They missed this meeting? What's up with that? I'm just here.
It's Labor Day weekend.
Oh, true.
So
So just
all-
a friendly, quick reminder, since I'm on this side today, if you guys would be real mindful of making sure to state your name for motion so that I can catch them on this side, that would be really appreciated. Thank you.
So you do have a quorum and all alternates can vote.
All right. And Jean Bray just joined us. All right, so do I have a motion for approval of the agenda for today?
So moved.
Reb, and then Larry seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, so we'll go with the agenda as published. Item number 3, public comment period for items not on the agenda. First, of any of the committee members have any comments? Anyone online? Not seeing anyone. Okay, anybody in the public, in the audience, have any public comments for items not on the agenda? No? Okay, great. Thank you. So item number 4, approval of minutes from August 4th. I hear a motion to approve the, Tom Vieira's makes the move in a motion.
Second, Gene Bray.
Okay, Scott had you first, Gene, so thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Not seeing anyone. Carlos, were you just scratching your head or raising your hand?
Just scratching. Sorry about that. I was
Okay,
hitting
no
the mute button.
That's
Sorry
no
about that.
problem. Just wanted to make sure you didn't want to get our attention. All right, thank you. All right, financial reports. Beverly.
Good afternoon, Beverly Mayeski, PPRTA Finance Manager. For my first item are the financial reports. In June, we received $13,444,000, which was $3,245,000 above the monthly budget, or 31.8%. So even though we had increased the budget, that's why we're increasing it again, because we're just knocking it out of the park.
Not a bad problem to have, right?
Right. So on page 2 then, compared to last June, we're ahead almost 2.6 million or 23.9%. Does anybody have any questions on the financial reports? There's quite a few other pages also.
Anybody online? Don't see anybody raising their hand or unmuting. Okay,
All right, my next item is the 2022 budget calendar. And it's very similar to last year. Last year, we had an issue with Veterans Day. I don't see that this year being one of the meeting days, but does anybody have any questions about the budget calendar? And if not, I'll take a motion to recommend approval by the board.
Ed Dills, a motion, second. Tom Vieira's, second. So to approve the budget calendar as presented by Bev. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Questions? Okay. All right, there you go, Bev.
Okay,
Motion
so
carries.
that's great. Thank you. The third item I have is the second amendment to the 2021 budget. In the first amendment, we added revenue and we firmed up the carryover figures to actual carryover figures instead of estimated. So this budget amendment, we're adding $22 million to sales and use tax. We're reducing interest earnings by $350,000 and increasing administrative expenses by $220,000 and an increase in reserves by $2.2 million. And that's dictated by the board policy. So we have a net addition to revenue of $19,230,000. So on page 1 of the budget that has the number on the bottom, we have the capital of $10,576,000, maintenance of $6,700,000 and almost $31,000, and transit of $1,923,000 that is allocated, and we're looking to appropriate it during this budget amendment. Now, does anybody have any general questions for me?
John?
Sorry. So we've chosen the number 22 million. To date this year, we are up 15 million. So you're projecting additional revenues into the future.
Yes,
Okay.
and hopefully it's easily that. kind of looks like it's going to be. I mean, we don't know when the downturn's going to happen. We know it will happen,
And if it did, we'd have an amendment 3 and reduce it back down.
but
Yeah.
we're going to hit the end of the year here pretty soon, right, Dale? We're kind of over this. No, there's so little time left this year. We're unlikely to have any kind of budget changes, but for right now, our sales and use tax figure is now 138 million. So,
And I think, didn't you discuss last time that the member governments had suggested that this allows them to accelerate some preliminary work, not necessarily construction per se, but it allows to start the process on future projects and move some things and get them under contract now versus going into the down season versus waiting to do it later. So is that generally correct, guys, in terms of that? Great.
there's only so much paving you can do now.
Yeah.
And get some things underway and get things underway, contracts underway for the beginning of next year. Push things a little bit forward. So how do you want to handle this budget amendment? We've been through this budget quite a few times. Do you want the member government staffs to give you a presentation or what? How do you want to approach this?
So I'll ask the CAC members, is there anyone that wants a presentation, or was your review of your read ahead material sufficient to answer your question? So if the read ahead's information was sufficient, don't need to say anything. I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask from my review, but do we need a presentation? Yes, no, feet around the room. Okay, so anyone online just want to see the presentation by any of the member governments? I'm not seeing any positive or, okay. Well, let's not do the presentations then
Okay, and then just ask the
and
questions
just
that,
ask some questions. So let's go with transit, which was the first one. I'm sorry, Bev, did I jump in on?
no, that's
Uh,
perfect. That's
So
just
any
exactly what you're
questions
doing.
on the transit documentation? None, not seeing anybody online. Okay. Colorado Springs was next. Note that Dave Zelenek is entered the room. So any questions on the city from anybody? I've got just a couple of observations or questions, if I may. So Gail, it looks like basically you're advancing the planning and or right away and that stuff from projects scheduled in the future, moving some of that forward so that you can accelerate those projects when it's right. Is that a good assumption in general?
That's correct. There's a handful of projects where either advancing money so we can get further along in the design or get the right of way done in advance, or even moving some of the construction dollars. So instead of having the construction in 22, 23, or I'm sorry, 23, 24, that we might be able to have them in 22, 23. So we're really prepping to get as many done as possible. One of the things, if you look at the city's quarterly report and we look at the pie chart too, and some of those outstanding projects, we'd like to be able to show as many projects complete as possible as we're getting close to that ballot measure in November of 22.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So the Gentile Road, the sidewalk insulation, is that beyond the scope of the circle bridges, the sidewalks that we're putting in by the bridges?
It is beyond the scope of what's currently in that Circle Drive Bridge package, and we want to go ahead and get that in place with our missing sidewalk program in advance of the project, and it's going to be able to be used for a detour, basically a detour route for the Pikes Peak Greenway during that construction.
Okay. On the emergency bridge fund. Oh,
Could I answer?
Red?
What do you mean a detour for the greenway? Detour means, to me, temporarily.
So the sidewalk is going to be remaining there long-term after the project's going to be done, but during the construction of the Circle Drive bridges, the Pikes Peak Greenway Trail that currently goes underneath the bridges will be closed. And so with this bit of missing sidewalk, and it ends up being about 850 feet worth, it's allowing cyclists that if they're on the trail to be able to stay on sidewalk or multi-use path to go around basically the detour around this closure that's going to be on the trail and then be able to enter it back up. Back.
So it's something that's gonna cost $850,000, but it's just temporary.
It is permanent and it's not $850,000. It's 850 feet, linear feet. And of the 475,000, that portion is 175,000 to go in and put that in.
I'll get into your details later.
Okay, just a question. You talked about the emergency bridge fund on Cash Laputer over Monument Creek.
Mhm.
Where's the Fillmore Bridge over the creek and the railroad that is in dire need of work
Yeah,
in
so.
the planning process?
Yeah, and I think you were probably remembering maybe some of the settlement monitoring equipment that was put in place in 2010 to 12 timeframe. It's been determined that movement that was being detected, bridge is relatively stable. The movement their experience has been from thermal expansion and contraction. They are still, however, looking for replacement. So if you go and look at our bridge plan, the bridges, the Fillmore bridges over Monument Creek should be replaced by 2039. And the bridges over the railroad would be, they're targeting a 2044 replacement period. So it's slightly too early. They've actually got a planning target date due, and they have some measures going in place in the next couple of years, just more maintenance things to continue to prolong it. But we're really going to be targeting in that late 2030 to early 2040.
Wow.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
I just remember riding my bike along that trail and I see one of those feet was up there
I'm
and it
with
was
you.
collapsed over on the side. I'm going like, that doesn't look good.
That same rock, I see that same rock, it kind of freaks me out too, Jim.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then I had one other question. Thank you for that. I had one other question on maintenance. In the maintenance, you got like a $10.6 million carryover going into just this amendment, and we're bumping up against the 2022 budget season. Just my question is, do we have a capacity issue? I mean, having maintenance money is a good thing, but are we getting more money in the maintenance budget than we can spend? I know there's a requirement there,
Right.
but can we execute that and reasonably? And I'm just thinking about it from a public standpoint that sees a large carryover going into another
Sure.
budget year. So what's the plan there?
So, well, the short answer to your question is it's really probably the right amount of money, and let me kind of explain a little bit why. That 2020 carryover amount was roughly that 10.6 that you identified that we carried over when we did the first budget amendment. You got to remember that that is the remaining unspent amount. It is not necessarily the city's obligation. So when we in December of 2020, where that number comes from, we had another 5.78 million of that already obligated. And then we had a 4 million that was carried over for in-house crews, but it was really due to COVID. So as COVID was hitting in the beginning of 2020, we're like, let's start pulling back budgets. We weren't sure what was going to be happening. So we pulled back all of our in-house work. And because we pulled it back and didn't really know that the economy was going to start recovering the way that it did, we just didn't have that plan. So of that 5.78 that was truly unspent, or I'm sorry, unobligated at the end of 2020, 4 million of it really was for that in-house work, which they put into the 21 budget, and they're using it and anticipated to expend all of that plus what they were given in the 21 year.
Okay. All right, I think that was all of my questions on the city budget. Anybody else have any questions for the city? Rick?
Just a procedural item with the arrival of David Zelenak and Joan. That means that a couple of alternates cannot vote or make motions. And according to my records on the rotating basis, that would be Jim Moore and Carlos cannot vote or make motions. Yes, participate in discussion, but not make motions.
Everybody got that? Jim, Carlos, you guys got it? Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for the update. Okay, any questions for the county budget? Jennifer's here to fight off all resistance. All right, any questions for Manitou or Green Mountain Falls? Either of those? All right. All right, Town of Rama, any questions on Rama's $1,400? All right. We're rocking. And the admin budget. So anybody question Rick or Bev? That's good. All right. Okey doke. You got a question, Rick?
No, I want to make a motion.
Oh, make a motion.
I move that we recommend approval of the revised budget 2021 revision 2 set forth.
So Reb has made a motion to approve. Scott,
Second.
Scott seconded. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, will all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, say no? Okay.
Thank
Good
you.
job. Good job, Bev. Thanks. All right. Item number 6, capital maintenance and public transportation contracts. City of Colorado Springs. Got 7 contracts. Gail, you gonna cover it?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Gail Servant, City of Colorado Springs. As Jim mentioned, I'm here to present 7 contracts for the CAC's recommendation. The first contract is for the Academy Reconstruction Project. That project has 2 different segments, the stretch that runs from Bijou to Airport Road, and then from Fountain Boulevard to Milton Proby Parkway. This change order is in a total of $121,200 to AECom, split between those 2 segments, $67,740 to the Bijou to Airport component and $53,460 to the Fountain and Milton Proby Parkway phase. That work in general is for additional utility coordination and street light design. Through the public engagement process on that particular project, there's been a lot of requests for improved street lighting along this corridor. So we are intending to add that in. Any questions on that item?
Tom?
I have a question. When I look at final engineering is change order 2 and then additional boring tests, that seems out of sequence. You know, I mean, recognizing that you're going to pick up some things along the way that you don't know,
Yeah.
but it seems like there was quite a gap, and in the middle of that is acquisition and bridge design and stuff. And then you go back and do more boring.
So, yeah, so what's happened on this particular project, Tom, is they've been working through utility conflicts and they come up with a new plan. They identify new utility conflicts or potential utility conflicts that requires them to go out and do an additional boring. So in this case, it's actually 9 new locations. Most of them, as I recall, are in that airport and South Academy intersections. There's a lot of major utilities that go through there, to include some gas lines that I know they're having a heck of a time coming up with a design solution in there. So it has been a little bit iterative. I would concur with you on that, but it's been necessary to resolve these utility conflicts.
Rev?
What about, they have closed two
Talking to you,
lanes,
Mike.
they have closed 2 lanes of Academy northbound. At the intersection of Pikes Peak and Bijou. And they've got private businesses along that have been hindered in opening, but they are only, the cones are there. I never see you, a quote working person there. I thought they were doing boring, but I have no idea. I don't know what they closed the damn road off for. It's like I went out there and put the cones up. Nobody came to do some work. And I've seen it twice in the past 3 weeks.
So I don't know for sure if that's really related to this project. I know there's some major utility crossings that go through at Pikes Peak as well, and there's some major groundwater problems at that particular location. But I could put some inquiry in with our traffic control and see if I could find out who's out there doing work.
Well, I was gonna ask you traffic control later, because I got another problem with Pikes Peak.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna move on then with
Please.
your permission to the
Please.
second contract. This is for use for the congestion incident management signal improvements phase 1 project. It is to start upgrading the school flasher system throughout the entire school area, throughout the entire city. It's in a contract value of $443,160 for Gates to go through and start doing the installation of those systems and helps provide a signal service.
Much needed.
Um,
Wait a
the-
minute, Rev, you had a question?
yes.
Yeah, I take it you're not,
Sorry.
is Todd not gonna be here? Literally, we've been told about, well, it started last year when we approved purchase of some signs, or them taking over those notification signs, the mobile notification signs. Literally, and this was, as I read this, it's supposed to make it so you don't have to send the crew out to do some repair or adjustments on the lighter.
So this particular contract is solely for school areas. So if you were to, like, if you're driving your car and you start entering a school zone and you see flashing lights, that they're upgrading that system. And so the techs can control those and do the programming for those remotely, as opposed to having to physically be on site to go make those changes. But I think you're speaking of message boards, is that correct?
That's right. Well, that question would go to, I don't know which issue, which of these addresses, but as far as schools, they are changing things weekly according to whatever health report they report. And so literally, I go through school zones that they're flashing, and I'm talking to the one at Pikes Peak and not airport. It slips me, but it's west of Academy. It's it's the top of the hill. It's Pikes Peak and Shelton. And that's got a flashing light. And then there's 2 trucks putting in each side of that thing, putting in, I don't know, fiber optics, I assume, they're in those cables. And is that going to be able to adjust to you? Your school is closed, but Jim's 4 blocks down the road and it's open. How do you, and I'm saying, picking 4 blocks, they're not that close, but how does that get taken care of by this?
I think the short answer, if I understand correctly, is yes. I mean, as what our traffic control guys say, they work with the facilities managements for each of the school districts. So if they show that they're going to have any kind of sessions, whether it's a regular school year or summer sessions or a modified schedule based on COVID restrictions, they're going to be able just to give the information to our traffic control guides. They can make the changes from the traffic control center without having to go out and make some physical modifications to those signals, if that makes.
So it'll stop them from blinking a week after school's let out.
We certainly hope so, Jim.
I was just.
You got to remember, some of these schools do have summer school. So
Yeah,
even
oh,
though
yeah.
it's outside the normal hours, they may have activities that do require them to still have those.
Sure.
But that's the intent, is to make them more accurate and more timely based on the adjustments in the schools.
And that's your question?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
All right. The third contract is going to be using maintenance money that we allocate for traffic engineering, is to do a change order for the Connect COS plan, or it's the Colorado Springs Intermodal Mobility Plan. Some of the main drivers for this change order are really related to a lot of the public engagement strategy shifts that we had to make related to COVID and some of the new tools we had to bring in. Plus, we asked the consultant to incorporate in more of our other plans throughout the organization, to include maintenance plans to help us come up with more comprehensive strategic solutions as we go through and look at transportation planning here in the next year. That change order is in the amount of $250,000 for Felsberg Bag. Contract number 4, I'll be presenting on behalf of the Parks Department, is for the Sinton Trail Corridor. They went through an invitation for bid where they received 2 bids to do trail replacement for about a half-mile section adjacent to Garden of the Gods Road from Arrow West Drive east to the El Paso County Citizen Service Center. And there is a location map provided if you'd like a little bit additional clarification there. If you happen to go to that trail segment, it has a lot of deteriorated, broken and heaving concrete, plus it experiences some drainage issues and that creates some issues with that trail section.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question about this project.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A question about the monument side, the Arrows West sign. I realize it's probably out of the scope of the project boundaries, but that is a visual obstruction on the trail for bicyclists, for eastbound bicyclists. Is that going to be addressed as part of this project or elsewhere?
Carlos, this is Gail's tournament. Unfortunately, I do not know the answer to that question, but I can ask Steve Bodett and get a response back to you.
All right, thank you very much.
Jim, do these trail improvements, are they part of the green belt play trail system?
No, this is actually a separate discrete A-list project on the PPRTA ballot, the Sinton Trail improvements. So there's 7 or 8 different trails that are on the A-list for PPRTA.
Aside from the general project category of trail improvement.
It is one of those that we include in that list, but they
Okay.
are all on the A-list of the
Okay.
ballot.
So it's part of that greenway belt that was referred to, and never mind about, there's a certain bridge that's been discussed before.
It is not part of that system.
not
It is
green.
part of the Sinton Trail system. It generally runs, it does run perpendicular into the Pikes Peak Greenway at Monument Creek, but it generally runs roughly along Garden of the Gods, back towards like Youth Valley Park. I'd be happy to show you on a map afterwards if you'd like to. Okay.
I have a quick question. This is Gene Bray.
Go ahead, Gene.
I've been up and down both sides of that street probably in the last 6 months mapping fiber optic cable. And I'm trying to understand why that's not sidewalk and it's designated as a trail. What makes the difference between it being a trail and a city sidewalk?
Well, it's really goes through and it comes like a multi-use path where it can be used for pedestrians and cyclists. But because it's that wider width, then we typically have sometimes we'll put different reinforcement or different depths of concrete based on what we anticipate in that loading. But width is the most common factor or feature, I guess you would see in differentiating between typical pedestrian-based sidewalk versus multiple users.
Okay,
That answer your question, Gene?
it does. I wish my memory was better, so I'll have to do some research.
We'll make that in the next change order.
Mr. Chair, can I just make a follow-up comment? I know we have to move on, but just a quick comment on that, the Sinton
Go-
Trail.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's actually one of our tier 1 trails. It does connect the Pikes Peak Greenway with the Garden of the Gods, with the Foothills Trail. This is pretty much the only connection between the Garden of the Gods and to the Pikes Peak Greenway. So this is an important trail. That's why I brought up the question about obstructions, since it is a multi-use trail and it does have intersection conflicts with traffic on that road. It is, we've had, unfortunately, it was a while back, we did have a bicyclist killed in this vicinity. So this is because of the descent. They were trying to avoid these obstructions, all right? And so when you see a bicyclist avoid obstructions and then they get into trouble, that's what we're trying to avoid. We want bicyclists to be safe and comfortable on these tier 1 connections throughout the city. So that's why this is important to do this right. And this is a tier 1 trail. Parks can certainly chime in on that, but these are essential to our active transportation network. So thank you very much.
Dave, you had a comment?
Yeah, on the fatality.
Mike,
The little, on the face, but this looks like it's speaking area.
Hey, Carlos, thanks so much. On the fatality, can you just very briefly help us? Was there a connection between the pavement condition and the fatality? Or was it somehow unrelated to the condition of the trail.
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, it was about 2 years ago. There was a cyclist who was actually going through the construction area. The connectivity between the Foothills Trail and the Sinton Trail isn't very good right there around what is now Red Leg. But there was some construction going on and there was debris on the street. And so with the cycle, there is actually kind of, if you look at the diagram, you can see that there's Arrows West Drive. That's kind of a cut through to avoid this segment. So if you're, and there's actually a descent, but they actually hit some debris on there and lost control and went into a guide rail. It was just a single bike accident or crash, I should say. There was no automobiles involved in that. It was just a very unfortunate, but it's just because of the nature of this. People are using Arrows West Drive as a cut. Now that said, because that trail does cross a number of intersections and you have that obstruction on Arrows West Drive and you have to go a little bit north, cyclists are just going to take what they consider the easiest path. And what we want is the easiest path to be the safest path if we can do that. So that's why we need to do that. But it was a very unfortunate, I don't think it was really, it was just construction debris. And it was one of those unfortunate situations that the road conditions resulted in this unfortunate fatality and a crash for a bicyclist there.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Go ahead, Gail.
Okay. Our next project is to bring forth a contract based on the new budget for those missing sidewalk programs or pedestrian transportation improvements. That would be the amount of $575,000 going to Even Pricer, and the intent of that would be to pick up those two segments we discussed on Airport and Janitel earlier today. Our sixth contract is going back to maintenance. It would be to pave a portion of Constitution Avenue from Bradley Drive to Powers, and it would include that cul-de-sac that's there in proximity to Brady. I said Bradley, I think it's Brady Drive. I apologize, I misspoke. And that is in the amount of $980,274.50. And that would be going to, make sure I say this correct, Martin Marietta. And go ahead. Oh, and the city's seventh contract is for a major bridge maintenance contract that would be awarded to Wildcat Construction in the amount of $1,287,552.45. This would be using bridge maintenance money. To go ahead and look at it based on some bridge inspections, they've revealed some significant concerns leading to this major deck rehabilitation and waterproofing. So with that is the last of the 7 contracts we are presenting. City is happy to entertain additional questions and request your recommendation for approval to the board.
Any further questions for Gail? Dave?
I'll move to approve.
Dave, thank you.
Second.
And Scott, second for approval. Any further discussion? Okay, all those, wait a minute, Rev?
Gail, is that the location?
Is that so? There is a location map that was attached with that memo for the Union Bridge over Templeton Gap. Unfortunately, I noticed when I printed it, the red square that's supposed to be around the bridge, it looks like it was overwritten by the country club marker on the printout. I don't know if you guys see that. That's what happened to mine. But roughly where that country club marker is in the middle of the map is where Templeton Gap goes underneath Union Boulevard.
Yes. That's right during that floodplain and that drainage ditch along there that's along there.
Yes, correct.
Got it. Any further questions?
No, I'm just. gonna-
Question, Gene Bray,
Yeah, go ahead, Gene.
is the bridge work on the road going to require any relocation of utility services in the area?
It should not. They're really going to be taking up that old deck that's got a lot of deterioration on it, repaving it and putting waterproof membrane on it. So I would not anticipate that at all, Gene.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so any further discussion? Okay, let's vote. All those in favor of the city's presented 7 contracts, say aye. Any opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 7, member governments and other reports. Transit, who's on for transit?
Good afternoon. It's Brian Vituli with the City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metropolitan Transit.
Hey, Brian.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I'd like to present our monthly transit report for the month of July. Thank you. So on the first page of this this item, you'll see our fixed route services. We provided nearly 194,000 trips in July of 2021. And you know, we kind of modified this report because of the last several months we've been comparing ourselves to 2020 when we were pretty much at our lowest service level and ridership level. So we added in July well, for this report, July of 2019. We can start to compare ourselves back to what a normal year would have been. So you'll see that comparing July of 2021 to 2020, we are, you know, up a little over 28%. But when we compare ourselves to July of 2019, you'll see that we're still down about 36%. So this we'll continue to do this going forward. And you know, if you look at the chart at the bottom of page 1, and you know, look at the solid bar, which represents the months of 2021, and you compare those bars to the bars of 2019, you'll notice one that, you know, yes, they are lower. The ridership levels are lower, but we're starting to follow that traditional ridership pattern that we see every year, where, you know, the winter months are somewhat lower than the summer months. You know, the warmer months usually generates more ridership. So we're following that same pattern as 2019, which is a good sign, but it's still low. And, you know, we are, I'll get into this at the end of the report, but we are really struggling to have enough operators to meet our line. So we still have 4 routes that are discontinued. Those are typically our lower ridership routes, but we're also having to reduce frequency. And we're really just having a hard time getting operators to apply, and then even to get operators to stay. And, you know, we're working really hard with our fixed route contractor to see what they can do to up their recruiting efforts. They've already increased pay for the training period where they go through the operator training and get their CDL. It's working a little bit. You know, we're getting a few operators here and there, but we're also losing in the meantime. So we're trying to keep the you know, the balance going in the right direction. But it is something that we're struggling with, and we're not alone in this. You know, transit agencies throughout the nation are dealing with this, even other industries. I mean, there are severe issues with employment related items. So we're trying to get through this the best we can. Moving to page 2, our ADA paratransit service. We provided just about 7,700 trips in July. That's up about 82% from July of 2020, but 37% down from July of 2019. Our specialized paratransit taxi choice option, you know, we just restarted this program in March of this year. So we're really just comparing ourselves to July of 2020. And, you know, ridership is still very low on that. For our van pool services, we operated 8 vans in July of 2021 with 41 active riders making almost 780 trips. So that's an increase of about 6% to July of 2020, but down quite a bit, about 79% from July of 2019. And on the final page of this item, project update, you've been seeing this over the past couple months. We are working toward implementation of our fall service changes. The 4 items on the memo there, Route 11, Route 22, 23, and 37, those will be implemented this fall on Sunday, September 26th. And the downtown shuttle was also approved, and that will be implemented at the earliest at the end of next April or probably around Memorial Day. And, as I mentioned earlier, we are hoping that we'll be able to move forward without delay with the implementation of these service improvements. But, as conditions improve, we hope to bring back service as we can. Of this list here, I assume Route 11 will go, because that is a route that is currently operating. So we're pretty confident that that will happen. What we've been seeing lately is even some of our weekend services, we've been having to, reduce frequency on some of the more frequent services just because we don't have enough operators. So whether or not we'll be able to implement Sunday services on routes 22 and 23, we're not sure yet. Our operations folks said that we have been able to get a few more operators here lately, so hopefully we'll be able to make those go. The Route 37, that's the Amazon airport service. That's conversion of that from an express service that operates, probably 6 trips a day right now to full service, including full ADA service. We anticipate that taking effect at the end of September, so that's good news. So that's about it for me, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Tom Beers was the other question.
Brian, back when we were talking about Amendment 2, we added 1.9 million, which is primarily, I think, going for salaries and operations. Is that kind of an aspirational goal that you've got shown there, since you can't seem to get enough drivers?
Well, just a slight correction. The 1.9 million that was just approved in the second budget amendment, that is for service. That is not for salaries. It's for putting service out on the ground, primarily off-peak service. So adding routes frequency to weekday evening services and adding more services to operate on weekday evenings and Saturdays and Sundays. That's primarily because most of our riders are service workers that don't work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. They need these services on the weekend. So, this sets us up for adding the service. We still have to go through a public process, which will be next spring. So at the earliest, this would be implemented, or all of these improvements would be implemented, would be April of 2022. So hopefully, at that time, the operator issue will somehow, balanced out. We can't stop planning for the future because of the current situation.
And I understand that. My question was related to how soon this was going to be, given the challenge of finding drivers.
Right. Yeah. So the improvements that you just recommended approval for in the amendment, those would be implemented at the earliest April of 2022. So hopefully we'll be out of the weeds with this.
All right. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Reb had a question.
Brian, on the 4th route, Route 37, and part of it, you're making changing from express to full service with ADA proposed implementation. That literally is going to be located, as I understand it, somewhere near the King Soopers on South Academy. I don't know whether it's on the east or west side, and I don't know whether it's literally at Drennan and Milton Proby Parkway. But aren't you a little ahead of when that's going to be constructed, with increasing the amount of service going to this, basically the airport and Amazon? And Just seems to me like you're a little ahead of the construction.
No, this is started in June. It operates out of the Hancock Plaza area on South Academy. So that's in the vicinity of Hancock and Asterzon. Amazon already has 2 facilities up and running, and they have for some time. Come October, they're going to have their 3rd large facility up and running. So Amazon's already there, and this service or this improvement from an express service to a full service opens it up to more employees going to the Amazon facilities, but it also enables visitors going into or out of the Colorado Springs Airport to use this service.
Yeah, well, where is this express service going to change over to full service? When I say that, I recognize what you're talking about as far as Amazon, but I shop at King Soopers down there frequently, and I don't see any buses, express or otherwise.
Well, we have what is called a super stop in the Hancock Plaza area. There's a series of stops on South Academy, on Hancock, on Asterzon, all around that area, east and west of Academy. So we have 4 other bus routes that converge in that area as well. So there's a lot of transfer opportunities from our customers coming from wherever in our system. They can take the other routes to Hancock Plaza and transfer to Route 37 and travel to the Amazon facilities in the airport.
Okay, Brian, I had a question and on the driver shortage issue, do you guys have any data or input on what's causing that? You answered one question that it is nationwide, not just locally, but do you have any data at all of why the people aren't applying and don't want to do this?
Well, it's kind of a perfect storm of bad situations. Yeah, it is this nationwide struggle with finding employees and keeping them. It's just some natural attrition. Some operators are retiring. And frankly, lately it's been the public, our customers have been brutal on our operators because, we still do have a mask mandate, which has just been extended from September through January now. So customers are angry about having to wear masks, and the operators have been frankly operating kind of at their limit for over a year now, and some of them have just burnt out, and they have chosen not to continue being an operator. So it's kind of a brutal situation there out on the street, but it is a combination of several factors.
There's not much we can do about it, or local policy or stuff that can help change or make that better.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're doing, and a lot of other agencies are doing. I mean, we're trying to stay out in front of it, and we're trying to post on social media frequently that, mask mandate is still mandatory, and but that only goes so far. But it is just a struggle that we're trying to get through, and we are really working with our contractor to try to address this and try to get out of it and stay ahead of it.
Okay. And Dave's got a question.
Mr. Chair, you raised a good point. I wonder, Brian, is there any impact on actual service? In other words, when an airline pilot doesn't show when the airplane sits, snowplow driver doesn't show, the snowplow sits, that's an impact on the public. Is there at this point an impact on the public? Are buses sitting? Are we missing routes? Is the service declining because of and it's a contract operation, right? So there's a contractor accountability in there. Can you help me kind of merge those two thoughts?
Yeah, it is a contractor situation. We are only paying for the services that are being operated. So we're not paying the contractor for what they should be operating. So, we are, the good part of this is we are saving some of our revenue. We're not having to pay the operator for services that are not operated, but yeah, no, I said this in my report, we have full 4 routes that are not operating. And all of that additional frequency that we've added over the last 5 or 6 years, we have several routes that operate on 15-minute headways. Some of those are either back to 30-minute headways or 60-minute headways. So it is having a huge impact on our customers. And it's very frustrating because we're at a time now, we've done our second budget amendment for 2021. We're getting more money to add more services. And here we are stuck in this situation of not being able to put the service out on the street. So it's very frustrating. We're doing the best that we can to work with our contractor, but until the situation improves, there are people being impacted by this.
And then the second part, Brian, of my question is, are there contractor consequences if they are unable to field the equipment that they're obligated to, I presume, under the contract for service, right? I mean, and we shouldn't be, as policy members of this board, engaging in helping them fix their problems, but is not true? It's not our problem. They're obligated to meet the terms of the service contract.
That is true. That's what we're working on. Yeah, we're doing that. We're trying to use a carrot approach before we have to go to the stick. But yeah, there are liquidated damages as any contract has, for services not provided. So we're trying to work through those before we have to go to that level.
Well, I would just encourage you to use every tool in the toolbox. If it's liquidated damages or other penalties, if they're not providing the service, that's unfortunate for our riders. It starts a downward spiral of expectations and service that reduces ridership. And if it pivots on the contractor's inability to meet the contract requirements, then shame on them. I'd encourage you to do all you can to hold their feet to the fire and bring the service back to the point where they're obligated. It sounds easy, but it's very difficult. I realize that in the current situation.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, but I do want to ensure that that we're doing everything we can. We have a very, very engaged contract procurement finance team that's working on all of this. So we're doing all we can.
It also puts you in that untenable area of you've given somebody something and now you've had to take it away. You've improved the level of service to 15-minute headways, and now you're having to cut that back. And you really don't like that situation of you giveth and then taketh away. So especially when you've got the money to cover what you had promised to begin with. So that's a bad situation. So we just hope it gets better. Thank you for your time, Brian.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Brian on transit?
Gene Bray, I've got one.
Go ahead, Gene.
Brian, you alluded to some of the issues that the drivers are facing with regard to pushback from the public and COVID-19 restrictions imposed by whichever level of government is imposing them. Do you have more recourse or less recourse with the contractor when the ability to fulfill their contract is dictated by government mandates that they have no control over?
Well, I think the way we're handling the mask mandate, the pushback to that, we do talk to our peers. There are state organizations and national organizations that transit agencies belong to. So, there's kind of a range as to how certain transit agencies are enforcing the mask mandate. And so we are working with our contractor with that. They are handling that pretty well. There's really, there's only so much that you can do or put on your operator to, enforce something like that with an angry public. So, We believe that they're handling that pretty well now, but as far as, government mandates, we're doing what we've been advised to do with the mask mandate per the Transportation Safety Administration. So we're abiding by that, but I don't think there's much recourse that we can do with our contractor regarding that.
My concern is that it would appear on the surface that at least part of the problem that the contractor has is being caused by government at some level or government agencies that and the like. But it would seem to me that they have a strong case to say that we've done everything that we possibly can, and it's not our fault. It's some level of government or multiple levels of government that are causing the problem, because it's creating untenable work conditions for our employees, and therefore I don't have to pay damages. That's one of the things that I think you may end up having to face in the near future. And I applaud the fact that you're doing everything you can with your contractor to work with them and help in any way possible to help solve the problem. But ultimately, as a fiduciary for the city, you're going to have to start trying to enforce terms of the contract that may require liquidated damages or the like. And I know that you, as well as your contractor, probably both want to avoid that. I don't know that there's a good solution, but just put that out there as food for thought, that if this is beyond the control of the contractor because of government edicts, then you want to wield the stick real carefully, because it may backfire, I guess is my feeling.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Brian? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, item 7B, presentation about the collaboration between Silver Key and Vita and Fountain Valley Senior Services. Yeah. Was it coordinated through the community, through the central dispatch?
It was. I can stand. Yes. I just can't walk, so I can stand them. Hello, my name's Jolene Houseman. I'm with Fountain Valley Senior Center. This is Jason with Silver Key. Oh my gosh. And Dave, I just said his name, with Invita. We had asked if we could be on your agenda because, as you guys know, we've started doing a collective, and PPRTA is one of our funders for that collective, and doing specialized transit in the community. And for those of you that don't know, specialized transit is above and beyond paratransit. So we're not competitors at all with MMT's paratransit. It's for riders over the age of 60, as well as those under the age of 60 with physical or intellectual disabilities. Currently, I would qualify for specialized transit in our area, because if I had to wheel my wheelchair 3/4 of a mile from a bus stop, I'd probably have a heart attack and die at the same time while trying to get there, because I'm not good at it whatsoever right now. And so we're the 3 largest agencies in the community that provides this service, but we're all very active within the MCC community and also help out the smaller agencies with problems and issues that arise with specialized transit. And the reason we have this collective is, first of all, communication. So there's not duplication of services and duplication of tax dollars across the board. And there were a lot of declined rides previously. If somebody called us and we couldn't do it, then they would just stop calling. And we can fully use vehicle capacity because we can combine all our vehicles. And then it is the best utilization of tax dollars. So some of the solutions that the 3 of us have come up with is we have now combined our database. So we all know COVID-19 has been a terrible pandemic. But part of that is back in April and May, when all the rides halted, we combined our databases within 2 months and got it working. So now when a client calls one of us, we can actually see all of our ride databases, all of our vehicle capacities. And if one of us can't perform the ride, we can put that client on either one of the other agency's vehicles to ensure that rider gets a ride. We also have combined our dispatch system. So now when they call in, the calls roll over to the main agency that they call. But if our dispatch is busy, it will roll over to one of the other 2 agencies. And this is extremely useful because we all operate on a shoestring budget and have very small staff. So now we actually can allow our staff to go on vacation and do trainings, because if one of our staff members is out, we can rely on the other 2 agencies to pick up those phone calls for us. And we can also do a better utilization of funding, because now we can leverage funding like the PPRTA funding against federal grants. And now that PPACG is the receiver of the 5310 grants and other federal funds, we can leverage matches a lot better as a collective, and working through PPACG being the holder of all the funding versus trying to organize across the board. We are very client-centric. We probably spend more time with the majority of our riders than even their families spend with a lot of them. So we have really high rates of being able to call APS and CPS for abuse situations, give a lot of referrals where they need them for like home modifications. We all have durable medical equipment, which I'm thrilled about right now. And we just really get to know our riders more of like on a family basis than just a passenger. And through this collaboration, we've had much fewer declined rides. With the dispatch and scheduling, we do share the coverage, and we can also do that with drivers as well. So if one of our drivers were to get sick, or we had an accident and a bus wasn't able to be utilized, we can go into the system now and shift all of that around. So the rides won't be canceled, but will instead be covered by the other agencies. And we're all open to, like, please knock on wood, if like 5 of my catalytic converters get stolen at once and I have no vehicles, then they'll let us drive their vehicles too, and vice versa. So it's just a much better pool of resources available to the community. And now we did try for years with the call center, and it wasn't really a 1 call center before. It's more like a 5 call center, the way everything just worked, because there's so many different moving parts. So now we're truly at a 1 call system. Somebody calls in and they get a ride with any agency, and we pick them up and take them. And a lot of these rides, Silver Key will drop somebody off, and Envita will pick them up. So they even ride multiple different agencies on the same day. And it just really helps spread the word of specialized transit available. Probably my favorite thing, it actually gives me goosebumps, is starting in January, we started tracking how many interagency trips are scheduled. So that's when one agency schedules for another agency. This would normally be declined rides. And in January, when we first started doing this, there's 46 trips scheduled. Keep in mind, in January, people still weren't going very many places. And in June is our most recent data point. We had 682 interagency rides scheduled. So that's 682 appointments, doctors, school, social events in the midst of a pandemic that would not have been given had we not had this collaborative. And some of the utilization of funding we're combining is 5310, the AAA, PPRTA, and Colorado Springs Health Foundation gave us one of the largest grants they've handed out to help set up our technology platforms. So it's not only the grants that go through PPACG, but we're leveraging it with community, state, and federal funds as well. And Envita got a fantastic grant that leverage with the National Center of Mobility Management to do all of our design thinking for the collaboration and to ensure that it's person-centered and not process-centered, because we want to get out of the mentality of it's a ride. It's a person that needs to get somewhere with dignity, and that's what we all stand for. And one of the best things that have come out of this is our dispatch and drivers. Our dispatch managers all meet once, like bi-weekly now. They were meeting a lot more often. So the interagency trust and respect that's been built amongst the agencies is going to have a lasting effect for decades, because now there's open lines of communication and trust, and we could each be given $2 million today and use all that money, because there's never going to be enough money to meet the demand in the community. And so now, instead of fighting over pots of money, we're figuring out how to share those pots of money to get the most out of the taxpayers' dollars. Some really neat things with COVID is when COVID first happened, of course, ridership declined, but we have bounced back. We are hitting capacity, all three agencies monthly. We have more demand than we can even provide. So our ridership is back up to not normal, but there's more than we can even handle. People want out, especially our populations that are the most at risk. And our populations trust a lot of our, because they know their drivers so well, they're not scared they're going to get COVID on our vehicles. Like, they know that we're doing all the sanitizing. The majority of all our staffs are fully vaccinated, and we don't have as much problem with the mask mandate on our vehicles, just because the majority of our riders have a lot of secondary health issues. So they kind of like those masks compared to just plain. And the biggest thing we did during COVID was there is a need in the community through the county health department and medical community wanting mass transit for vaccine clinics. And they reached out for help. And Envita was able to establish a COVID hotline in less than 36 hours to make it operational. And all three of our agencies now provide vaccine clinic rides anywhere in the community. And with booster shots coming up, I imagine it's nice because we don't have capacity restrictions right now. So keep your fingers crossed those don't come back, because we can pack the buses for booster shots. And people are just a lot more trustworthy of the senior center, Silver Key and Envita, because we see those people day in and day out. So the likelihood of getting boosters for our populations just increases because of the trust and respect we have with them. And what our future outlook looks like is we, once we have all the processes, like this has been a lot of increasing and ironing out processes through the agencies, we hope to increase participating agencies so we can reach out to those smaller agencies. So when they have downtime on their vehicles, we can start plugging in rides, which will not only generate revenue for those nonprofits, but it means even less declined rides in the community. We want to continue leveraging funding so that we have a basis of community, local, state, and federal funding. So this isn't all reliant on federal funding, because the majority of our budgets for transit is federal funding. And so we want to see it more diversified, because you don't want to ever lean on one agency too much, although we love PPRTA, I'm just saying. So, you know, I heard a little budget overload. So, and we of course want increased ridership. The senior population especially is only growing. It's not getting smaller. And in the next 10 years, we're going to have even more people ages 60 and over. I like to call the 55 to 65 my baby seniors. And so we'll see a lot of them. And we want to make sure that they know how to use the system before they have to use the system. Because when you get in situations like this, it changes your life real quick. And so we want to make sure they're established and know how to use the system in the process before they have to. Do you guys have any questions?
Dave?
Always have a question for a piece of great news. This is probably the best news I've heard
Yeah.
this week. It's been a tough week on the news. This is
Yes.
great news. congratulations to you, everyone involved. This is just extraordinary work. I know this does not come easy. It's not cheap. It's not fun, but I think you're at the point where it's really an amazing coordination of such complicated systems. I can't begin to imagine how hard it was to get to where you are now. So congratulations
Thank you.
for a job well done. I do have two questions. The 385 ride number that's been around for a long time, is that still working, or how
Yeah,
would that
so
work?
the city MMT gave us that number to
Okay.
carry over, and that's what we're still using for brand new clients. So the one ride number, because
Right.
it's one ride, but it still is in use. So we didn't have to remarket or do anything with the phone number, because that
Okay.
wouldn't have been cost effective.
Yeah. So help me understand specialized transit compared to, I know ADA requires certification. You have to have a physician sign off on a paper for an ADA ride. But you folks provide rides. Is specialized a subset of that, or is that a side
It's like
category?
above and beyond it, because it's a different funding source from the federal government. It's 5310.
Yeah.
So what differentiates it too is paratransit can only go like a certain I think it's like 3/4 of a block from a
distance,
bus
yeah.
stop. Whereas we do door to door and door through door transportation.
Okay.
So say in my current situation, I have stairs at my house. I'm so lucky. If one of our drivers were to drive me home, they would actually help me physically get my wheelchair back into my house.
Okay.
And so when you look at a lot of physical disabilities or somebody that's lost a leg trying to get back in their house on their own, or with groceries. And then where it really comes into play as well, which is in Vita's strong suit, is the IDD population. So the intellectual developmentally delayed population, because that's not a population, especially the kiddos, or really any of them, depending on what their needs are. You can't just drop them off at the end of their driveway and wave and drive off. You want to lay eyes on door through door. So there's a much higher safety risk involved with our passengers.
So the specialized really is a subset, even a higher level of ADA. It's not,
Yes.
for example, if grandma's 92, God bless her, and she can drive, she's totally healthy, but just simply prefers to take Silver Key somewhere.
Then she can, just because of her age, she qualifies.
Okay.
So it's kind of like 60 and above, you're just clear. You can ride it.
Okay.
I gotta say, I wish some of my seniors would ride it over driving to the senior center if you look at parking. But and where the like very able-bodied seniors, like a 92-year-old that drives a lot of times, where they use us more for transportation is field trips and getting out in group outings where they don't get that social interaction otherwise. So
Gotcha. Well,
yeah, and
congratulations.
medical,
This is
huge
just
medical.
remarkable.
We do a lot of cataract and like different things people can't drive themselves home from.
If I may just add real quickly about some of the older drivers that are able to navigate well. What is different with our systems is that we also engage volunteers as part of our workforce. And so with that, we, at least particularly in our two organizations, but again, we support Invita with this. Some of our volunteers are in the age group of 60, 65, 70, and they've gone through the full training, through the full experience of making sure they're safe and secure on the roads. So some of the capacity that we have is from people who are actually not needing the service, but are benefiting others because they can volunteer. So that's another support that's come in play, particularly through COVID. We had many teachers, we had many other people that weren't working at the time supporting us during that time.
Congratulations. If you can come back every month with good news, I'd love to put you on the agenda. Just one final question. I'll throw out a question for which there's probably no answer. Route optimization software, I know, is all the rage in the industry now. Are you folks able to, or do you need additional funds?
I got an answer.
Okay, please, route optimization.
So all three of us actually use Route Match software.
Perfect,
So right now we do use route optimization within it. I think someday we will use it even more fully for optimization, but right now, the clients that we have don't have a lot of personal choice in their life. A lot of them live in boxes. So if they want to call and they want Silver Key to drive them, right now it's their choice and we let them unless they don't have rides. If you go to full route optimization, that would just be whichever one's most convenient. And I think someday we'll get there because we're going to have to for capacity reasons. But right now we want to give them as much freedom of choice as we can, because they have very limited freedom of choice, the people that ride our vehicles.
Very well done. Thank you.
I'd like to piggyback on Dave's congratulations. I was part of the mobility coordinating committee when this whole process started. And to say there were territorial boundaries is a very polite statement that went on in some of those meetings.
Yes.
And you guys have come a long way, and this is what the community needs.
Yeah.
And I think this was the goal. I'm getting emotional about it. I
Yes.
think this was the goal from the very beginning, but you had to work through all of this. This is mine. I think Rev and I were part of the 5310
Mhm.
process one year. Very competitive in that environment. And so congratulations, you guys have come along.
Well, and I want to give a lot of credit to Jason and Gail. Like Jason and I came on to our agencies about 3 years ago, and I think that's what really helped with some change in
And this was-
leadership at
this
our.
was 6 or 7 or 8 years ago
Yeah,
when all this
that
started.
it
so-
started. And not only did we learn how to work together, but I can truly say at the end of this process, not only do our 3 agencies have a great working relationship, but me, Jason, and Gail are truly friends who completely trust and respect one another. And that's just trickled down through our agencies. So the relationship building has just benefited the community as a whole.
And that shows in the progress that you've made. So
Chairman Godfrey, if I may just give one quick example of how this actually works, boots on the ground. I love that you said, I'm getting a little emotional in this. I used to be part of Pikes Peak Partnership 16 years ago when this initially started. So it's been a painful process throughout the years. So I've always been peripherally involved, but I will let you know, I went to a community meeting that I had to go to. And when I was at that meeting, I was looking in and I saw that a Silver Key bus had pulled up, and I thought, wow, that's great. Silver Key's out in the committee. This was over in District 20. And then what happened, this gentleman went in, got his service taken care of. And then he came back out, and then Vita bus picked him up. So for that same experience, we had a way for our 2 systems to pull together to make sure he had access there. And I was just so thrilled that that's such an example of just what you described that we were intending to get to all those years ago.
great. Thank you very much for,
Thank you.
and if you need specialized transit, we know who to call.
I do want to also note, this is the first time since I broke my leg 3 weeks ago that I have had multiple offers to help me get out of my car, open doors for me. So thank you, PPACG and all board members, because this is the first time I haven't broke a sweat trying to get somewhere. So thank you.
Good deal. All right, thanks again, folks. All right, item 7C, PPRTA 3 matrix. Rick, you gonna cover this, or Gail? Gail, you and your dynamic county partner over there?
Yes, we will do our best to cover it. So in your packet, you'll see the latest and greatest of the PPRTA 3 decision matrix, along with the minutes for what happened from the board meeting that took place on August 11th. I will let you know that we had been asked to reorganize what was initially the 16 items into, we talked about 3 categories, and I ended up really with 5 categories. Items that were complete have already been decided. Items where both staff and the CAC agreed. Items where staff and CAC agreed by vote, but comment was offered. Items where staff and CAC disagreed, and then there were some remaining items discussed. As of that board meeting, 11 of those initial 16 items are closed. As these items are presented in this new order, item 7 was deferred until we were able to discuss item 13, and items 13 through 16 are planned to be discussed next Wednesday, along with new item 17, which we'd like to bring forward to the CAC for their consideration and input at this time. And let me just give you a little bit of a framework of how this question kind of came up, if you don't mind. At the last board meeting, there was some discussion towards the end of the meeting about some of the pending greenhouse gas reduction regulations that we're currently going through, making through with the state right now. And there was some concerned placed, just from the initial information that's been put out, and now that we're seeing the draft, I think that concern could be warranted that we may be in a position that if we have projects that we're bringing forward, even if they're locally funded or using PPRTA funds, since they may be considered regionally significant, that if this capacity impacts may not be permittable. We don't know for sure exactly what it's going to look like, but that's kind of the background of the concern, just to give you a high level. So and these regulations that are pending with the state are anticipated to be adopted by the end of the year, with some of the first milestones needing to be met in 2022. So there was a lot of discussion with the board. Again, we're all learning more and more about this, but a lot of discussion with the board, and what was really put forth is whether or not we should consider in the November 22 ballot language that could apply to both PPRTA 2 and PPRTA 3 A-list projects, that you could move from the A-list to the B-list if all A-list projects could not be funded as a result, or could not be completed or funded, really couldn't be completed, I think is more the case, as a result of changes in local, state, and federal regulations, acts of judicial, governmental, legislative, or regulatory authorities, or other force majeure events. So it was a big discussion. There's a lot to unpack in this one statement. And Jennifer Ivey has already spoken with the board a little bit about this, and I know there's going to be further discussion next week. But I wanted to let you know from a staff perspective, yes, that given the currently developing state regulation requirements and the potential for new federal regulations, we think there could be a potential for significant impact for transportation projects, and we don't know what we don't know yet, right? So I think it's worthwhile to at least consider having that included in the November 22 ballot language. And I don't know, Jennifer, if you wanted to add anything on to that.
Well said. Well said, Gail. We just want to make sure that we're continuing, if we make promises to the voters, that we can do that in all ways and allow us to adjust that if the worst comes to worst. This is not something that we would want to do or desire to do. And I think we would be moving heaven and earth to make sure that, if one of our projects came in, that we are creative and innovative and able to find a way to get it done anyway. So,
Richard, you look like you had a question.
Yes, sir. The staff has done a good job as usual in that Gail's explanation followed by Jennifer tracks with everything here. And I am definitely inclined to support it. However, I do want to point out, number one, if this is put in, and I think it should be, I think you better realize that if the public is aware of this, you're taking a promise of A and you're getting rid of it in effect, or you're downloading it to B and you probably won't get to it anytime soon. Then that is a negative impact on the voting. So I think that we need to add something to a favorable recommendation, which I would support. And that is that such a move would require something like, I think I'm new enough to PPRTA, but we've used the phrase a supermajority of the board. I don't know the numbers that's taking, but if we need to put in some sort of significant decision by the board that requires more than just the usual majority. So that's my comment.
Scott?
I think this is probably more a legal question, but maybe it's already been asked. Is this something that could be done in a board policy rather than on the ballot language? Because the more you put in that ballot language, the tougher it's going to be to pass.
And Rick, if you want to jump in on this, but I know that Jennifer Ivy's been involved in these discussions, and it sounds like because the ballot already says today cannot move to the B list unless an A list project is completely funded, we would have to be, unless for some reason there's some regulatory requirement that would preclude the completion of this project. And I know she's already been thinking about what that language is. And Richard, I just wanted to say, we do share your concerns that if we have to put this, essentially it's the slide on the way out and not completing the A list, that we prefer not to do it, and it could be construed unfavorably by the electorate, but we feel like there might be something we have to consider this case, given how the regulations are shaping up, unfortunately.
Rick, and then Reb, and then Dave.
So the current language in the two ballots, the prior ballots, and if it continues over to the PPRTA third ballot, just says that all A projects have to be completely funded prior to moving to the B list. So unless you add this exception, if the state's Senate Bill 260 greenhouse gas rulemaking effort ends up after a lot of rulemaking and rulemaking that's not finished yet, that won't be finished until January. If that worst case scenario is that since the Senate Bill 260 process defines adding a lane as equals adding greenhouse gas. So if you're widening a 2-lane to a 4-lane, or you're adding Powers extension where it doesn't exist, then that's by definition is adding greenhouse gas, which either puts you over your limit of your metric that you're assigned, or well, if it puts you over, then you can't proceed with the widening or new road. So now you can come up with mitigations, which could be spending money on the bus system, sidewalks, trails, ped ramps, etc. There's a big long list of mitigations, but that has to be non-vehicular to be credits, mitigation credits against your expense of greenhouse gas for adding a lane. Now, any PPRTA project that's just replacing a bridge or replacing a two-lane road with another 2-lane road, no problem. It's the adding the lanes. So this topic was entered into discussion at the last board meeting by CAC Chair Jim Godfrey, saying we need to consider adding an exception on the PPRTA 3 ballot, other than just saying you have to finish all A's before you go to the B's, because if the greenhouse gas limit doesn't allow you to finish the A's, but you can go to the B's, but you have the money to go to the B's, but you can't get there because the greenhouse gas limit won't let you finish the A's. So this was brought up by Jim. The draft language was that you see in the black ink in number 17 was mentioned by City Council member Wayne Williams, and then the board attorney latched onto that wording, and that's what is in your black ink portion of number 17 is what the attorney is recommending. Of course, she can touch it up, but if you don't have some ballot approved exception to move from the A to the B, if the greenhouse gas stops you on some of your last A's, then you're stuck.
And nobody can move, not just that organization. So Reb had his hand up, then Dave, then Scott.
in this discussion, we're talking about something that is not gonna even be written down until January, if I recall. Why do we have to approve language being written for something that may not even come into effect? Because if I recall, it was also pointed out that we didn't really have to give a go-ahead for ballot language or for somebody to work on the ballot language until July of next year. And now we're supposed to vote on something to go to the board as a recommendation.
So I think the suggestion is let's approve this on a contingent basis. Let's see how the rulemaking plays out in December, January, February, in the spring. And then either this is a wild card that's pre-approved. If you need it, play it. If you don't need it, don't play it.
Yeah, I just want to point out that I happen to agree with the assessment. Boy, you start putting a lot of words on that ballot and you're going to lose votes.
Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Gail, if I may. So the county, I understand, respect completely is a branch of state government. But arguably the city government is home rule, and this, and I don't mean to pin you with a. Yeah, so please answer my question. I know you can probably anticipate where I'm going with this, because with a hypothetical, this is preposterous in my mind. Just to use a hypothetical example, you've got a developer with an exaction obligation to widen, I don't know, Mark Shuffle Road. And he's got outside money in. Mark Shuffle is not a state highway. For the portion in which it's within the city limits, there's no county, which you could argue is a branch of the state. There's no state involvement whatsoever. It's a home rule municipality with developer money on a city street. You can't spend it to widen Mark Shuffle. Even, it sounds absurd and extreme, but this is an absurd extreme measure in my mind. You've got bumper to bumper traffic, and you add a lane to reduce greenhouse gas emissions because you've got congestion right now. You're going to eliminate the congestion with a new lane with other people's money inside the city limits. I can't think of a more perfect bad example. Is it true that you would have to go through this process, and the city would be holding to the state, not allowed to widen the road with its own money in its own city?
So I'm going to try to break down.
That's a lot of questions there, but I
and
mean,
I've gone through all the
preposterous.
proposed rulemaking. I will try to break it down maybe as simplistic as I can. I've had this exact same question, and honestly, we have a lot of attorneys looking at this in
Okay.
addition to the city. So
Okay,
just
thank you.
us from a staff standpoint.
My question's answered.
Well, but I do want you to know something to think about, because we will come back and talk about an example you've given, just kind of high level. This whole thing is based on a model that we had no input on, for a statewide model that supposedly has taken into what somebody has determined our growth rate's going to be and what their interpretation of our long range plan is going to look like, and put a model together and set a base year value based on an interpolation of what they had from 2015. So that base year model is set in 2025 is that first year. And then they've added reduction. So for us, as we go through and have to expand our transportation network to handle congestion or anything like that, we have to put mitigation measures in place. And Rick did a good job of talking about all the main ones that we as transportation professionals can look at, whether it's trails, it's transit, it's pedestrian facilities. But really the premise of this to gain the reductions in what they're trying to get at is so we switch from gas vehicles to electric vehicles. That's the only way to achieve these goals. And that's really the driver to get there. Right now the carrot is in here is that if we're not showing adequate progression towards our model or reducing our emissions, that we won't get federal funding, or we won't get the allocation. And then the federal allocation will only be able to be used for future greenhouse reduction activities. So that is the whole rule in a nutshell right there.
But that,
In my interpretation of it, by the way, I just want to make sure that
but
that's
that
clear.
apply, but that applies to the whole region because you're the metropolitan planning areas. So it
Right, that
applies
is correct.
not just to the city, but the whole MPO. and that involves Woodland Park and Park County and all of this for transportation.
Yeah.
Well, Park County is not transportation.
Right, and some of the things that I talk about as well, not providing parking or changing your land use regulations to help get credits and show that you're making progression towards this activity. But you're right, there's only so much control we're gonna have from a transportation standpoint, and I 100% agree as a home rule city. that
I
It
think
goes
the
against
answer-
The whole infill concentrated thing. Scott, you had,
I think the short answer to Dave's question is, can that developer do that? And I think the short answer is no.
Because that will count against us from our greenhouse gas calculation. Because that just minor development stuff. But anyway, again, there's a lot of things going on the next couple of months related to this.
So the city and county, you have $100 million in exactions on the books. Probably, I don't know what the number is. It's many millions of dollars of exactions where developers are required to bring money forward at certain trigger points. And this is negating tens of millions of dollars and impacting the economy of the region. That's a gross overstatement, but is that loosely accurate?
I can only tell you what my interpretation is of rules right now.
Thank you.
I don't necessarily disagree.
I would add, Dave, just because we've had some meetings with developers, not on the subject, but on their letter of credits. I have one developer in the county who has $500 million worth of improvements, and that's one of our developers.
So
that
it's
we're
worse than
holding money
100 million. It's 5 times worse than 100 million.
Yeah.
That's insane.
And that's just one developer in the county. It's one of our largest, but yeah.
Scott, you were next, then Richard.
Yeah, so often, as Dave referred to, adding a lane at an intersection reduces greenhouse gases because those are produced when people are idling at a stop. And I've worked for agencies before where we actually got federal money to synchronize traffic signals because specifically it reduced greenhouse gases. Is there nothing in the model or the rules that allow for that, or to allow that to at least, I mean, you can do models that show how much greenhouse emissions you're eliminating compared to a no build situation. Is there any way for that to be factored in?
Scott, I believe there actually is a provision if you can quantify the reduction on the load or the what they refer to as the carbon dioxide equivalent, which I've done the exact same thing in a cost benefit analysis. I converted those emissions to metric tons. It's the same thing. So the intersection improvements, I actually don't see that as, I actually think we would be able to do intersection improvements because of that exact same reason. But if you were going to go add another lane, I think that's where we're going to have a hard time. Unless you're putting a dedicated transit lane in, and then I think I could say that one's okay.
Right. Rick?
Another example to play with, and maybe it could be appealed via modeling, is Powers Extension. If you're at 83 and Northgate, and you take Northgate West over to I-25, I drove it the other day. I drive it all the time, but I finally counted the traffic signals. There are 7 traffic signals on Northgate between 83 and I-25. So all the cars that stop and start at the 7 traffic signals are emitting more greenhouse gas than if there was a continuous flow of Powers Extension from 83 over to I-25.
Larry?
There it is. Question. The state health department in the Denver metro area, under the board, I guess you might say, tried to put in some regulations as far as requiring, and some of it relates to exactly what you described, Gail, as far as, cutting the greenhouse gases. And what they did is they tried to put in and make companies do things like, for example, put in showers, have people pay people to take transit. But that blew up when it really came out in the paper, and when people and the companies really started learning about it. Do you think the possibility the same thing could happen with this process once city, counties, start learning about what this could do?
So in this particular case, I'm going to answer the second part of your question first. I don't think we're going to maybe get as much traction with pushback with the cities and the other local governments on this particular item, because it's not just the Senate Bill 260. There's actually a couple other House bills, and there's some legislation that's been put in place as far back as 2017 with some of these goals. So it's really been building. So I think from having something in place for some kind of goal or metric, I think that we're going to end up with something. What I'm reading today, I'm hoping that's not the case, but I think we'll end up with something. One of the other things that just so that I think it was different than what you were mentioning, Larry. The other part that had come up recently was what was it? They called it the employer transportation alternatives. Anyway, they were trying to enforce employers to basically monitor their employees' transportation choices in Pavement. So that's dead right now. For now. But anyway, and I think they're still encouraging that from a voluntary standpoint, right? But you can't force, similar to like the whole shower discussion you were bringing up, really can't really force the employers to take on that financial burden or impact to their business. I think is really kind of how I understood that it died. But it sounds like that even though that died at the Transportation Commission, it was a very unpopular choice by a lot of the commissioners. So as Jennifer, I think she's alluding to, we'd likely hear something similar to that in the near future.
That's why I was wondering if, once this starts getting close to being published or put out to the public, whether there was backlash to the process, especially, like for example, the state has done a study on Highway 24. Jennifer's very familiar with it. On the hack, we're all familiar with it, is that there's a lot of projects out there to improve transportation, but it could have a detrimental effect on the gases that are in this area, because unfortunately, sometimes, you do put more traffic on there, but what that does is it's bringing in the traffic from outlying areas. But it is increasing the air, the air quality degradation, I guess you might say. But, the state has shown that whole project is really needed for the projection of population and traffic growth out there. So from what you're saying, and from what I've read a little bit, is that whole thing could be shut down if, and depending on, what matrix they come up with on the, in this whole area, I guess you might say, which would be detrimental to, eastern El Paso County and State Highway 24.
Richard had his hand.
Yeah, first of all, I I try to be as practical as I can. None of these bad things that you all are discussing is going to change. It's going to get worse because it'll reach the implementation stage. The best hope that we have is with our attorneys, our legislators that don't agree with this. And the next best hope coming up is going to be the next time our state legislature meets, and you can, and maybe in the election process of who's going to be representing the people in Colorado. And that'll be the time that we have the best opportunity. And I'm sure that the attorneys for both the particularly the city and the county, are aware of all of these things and working on it, and I have faith in them. I hope they have faith in us on transportation issues. I was pleased that staff, both staff, our staff, when we speak of it, is basically the county and the city engineers. And they both agree that we need to, at this stage, even if it could be rejected by the board later, if they didn't need to do it. But that the staff recommended using different language in the next the continuation of PPRTA, because you all have on about 2 of the 3 remaining questions, you have objected to in the language of modifying what language exists today. So you are supporting a change. Now, I have noted that and was going to bring it and will bring it up again in the when we get to that point. And I will point that I won't have to point this out again. I will just say that as a citizen, and if I don't have any problem facing political issues. And I certainly don't have any problem recommending changes to the legislation. And I think the staff should hopefully join with CAC in supporting a few of these statements where they are in opposition to changing the language. Because you're going to have to do it here. And if it's a good idea, do it at the other places. Thank you.
So for the guys online, Scott's had his hand up, then Gene, and then Ryan. Okay, thank you. Gene, just up to you.
A couple of questions. Let's see if my memory is good enough to remember it, and or they got lonely and left. First off, with regard to the modeling, I believe you said it started with data in 2015 and extrapolated to a point in the future. Does that modeling account for the explosive growth in Colorado Springs starting, well, this year in late 2019?
They state in the proposed rule that it does include growth, but we do not know what that growth rate was or how it was applied to the model.
Okay. And the second question is, and I guess it's technical in nature, but certainly a roadway that is classified D or F with regard to its service capabilities increases the amount of greenhouse gases produced along the roadway during the time periods when the service levels are at that rate. I suspect that greenhouse gas emissions begin going up at service level C, although I don't know that factually. My question is that in some cases, adding lanes actually does reduce greenhouse gas emissions so long as the service levels stay at a level where traffic is flowing the way it should along the corridor. But as it gets more congested, and there's, according to what I understood you to say, there's no provisions for being able to offset the emissions numbers for the fact that in reality, they might go down until the service level reaches a point where congestion now pushes them back up again. Is that correct?
So your statement about when you remove congestion or add lanes to remove congestion can reduce the greenhouse gas reductions. It does look like there's some provisions that we can show that there's reduced gases on for that particular project. And when you're looking at individual projects, but it's really going to be where we are holistically in our models, kind of for the area. So for example, in 2025, the loading is 2.7 million metric tons. That's our budget, right? But by 2030, so in 5 years later, our budget is 2.2 million metric tons. So that's a 5 million metric ton reduction when we're supposed to be accounting for those capacity projects that we've already identified in the long-range transportation plan and growth. So, that the goal is to have a mode change, people making individual mode changes on how they're going to do transportation or shifting to electric vehicles is really what the driver is behind this proposed rule. I don't know if I answered all your question, Gene. I'm trying to do my best with it with the limited information that we have thus far.
No, you sort of did. I really didn't expect a detailed answer on it, but well, I'll be quiet and let's move on to the next person with the question. Thank you.
Right, Ryan, you had your hand up and you just took it down.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Jennifer and Gail, thanks for bringing this forward. I support this this recommendation for the change in our TA3 ballot language, because just for all the reasons that you've already mentioned, that we need to provide that flexibility to move projects up or down the priority list depending on external circumstances, as I'll call it. And I don't need to belabor the air quality modeling and those impacts. I come from a state prior to living here where that was the norm. And so I'm very familiar with how this is restrictive for capacity increasing projects. So just a good job by you two, and I support it. Thank you.
And then Dave?
I just wanted to offer, wow, this has been eye-opening. Gail and Jennifer, you've done an extraordinarily great job with such extraordinarily bad news. It's a very thorny issue here. I'd like to offer, Mr. Chair, is there a way we should move this forward into a vote or action? What would you like to do?
Yes, I would. Larry's got one comment first, and then we'll call for a vote. I think everybody's had an opportunity to talk. Thank you.
I'd just like to say that I would support adding this, to the ballot if necessary. But I'd also encourage that and this follows what Reb said and also Scott said, that if we do add this to the ballot, that hopefully the attorneys will be able to minimize the wording so we don't end up with a long, 2-paragraph, whatever. What is here is very simple, and I think, is very straight to the point. If they could do something like that and just keep it simple so that we don't add too much to the ballot language.
Well, I can tell you that the board is very concerned about that issue as well, as we all should be. But as I voiced the concern was that I would hate to see us, and this could actually impact RTA 2 as well. But if this goes forward and we suddenly find ourselves being impacted by it, everything comes to a screeching halt. If you can't get beyond that last A-list project, you can't move to B because of the current language. So I don't envision, Jennifer Ivy's been very proactive in helping and advising the board. I can't imagine that it would take a long paragraph. It just needs something in there to say, unless exempted by the Air Quality Act kind of thing, which gives you an out to skip over it and bypass the language. So they're totally aware. The board is totally aware of that. So I appreciate you bringing that up and being concerned about it as well. So Dave, would you like to make a recommendation?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my arms around what would do the most good at this point. Do you want a motion to support the staff recommendation? Is that, Rick, what you need at this point?
Yes, that would be good.
So I'd like to move that we support the staff recommendation. And I think to Larry's suggestion that we maintain maximum flexibility in the language, and likewise, we minimize any extra complicating language. I don't know how best to frame that, but to move forward with maximum flexibility for the staff to work actively to obviously move this forward and oppose the home rule local government restrictive issues as best we can for this number 17. For this number 17, thank you.
Joan?
I'll second it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you, Dave and Joan. Any further discussion? Anybody online that I'm missing? Reb?
I'm going on record as saying that I will vote no against this on the just basis. I don't have a clear understanding. They've done far more studying and they are only guessing at what might be coming. So I'm not going to vote for something that I'm guessing at, basically.
Okay, any further questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
No.
Okay. All right, motion carries. We'll push forward to the board to accept number 17 as a staff recommendation that we should have some kind of language in here to address the new legislation. So thank you very much, Gail. Thank you.
And thank you just for the minutes, Rick, that I'm trying to keep in this log. What was that vote? Is it 14-1? Is that correct? 16-1. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to item number 7D, the City of Colorado Springs update on, now I guess it's called the Park Union Ped Bridge instead of the Bridge to Nowhere. So, yeah.
It is called the Park Union Ped Bridge. So based on, I believe it was Reb to ask some questions last month. Told you I would bring back a memorandum to let you know what the $4.56 million that was authorized by PPRTA and how it was applied towards the Park Union Bridge project. I wanted to let you know that in preparation of this memorandum, not only did I go back and take a look at the financials for this project with the project manager, but also went back and looked at, there were 3 significant memorandums that were prepared previously for the CAC and the board on this Park Union Bridge and kind of the evolution of this project over time. And I've referred to those dates in the end of the memo. I think of those 3 memos that were back, the one done on June 5th, 2019 is maybe the most succinct way to show the overall cost of the overall project and the different pieces of the project, what those costs are and how are they paid for over time. So this memo is just focused on that $4.65 million. As you can see, that I've broken that down into 6 different categories. They're all individual contracts with the exception of the second row where it says multiple engineering contracts. And in the narrative, I've broken down who those companies are that make up and provided other professional services to support the bridge. I will say that there are, of the $4.65 million authorized, there are $7,684.14 remaining. And all those first 5 items in that table also were completely, PPRTA completely paid for those services on that last item, the Kiewit contract. That's what we were voting on last month. Only PPRTA only paid for a portion of that. And that table of what is included in the overall Kiewit contract as it related to the Park Union Bridge is provided on the 2nd page of the memo. So try to provide you a lot of information. I'd be happy to read through it, but I hope that answers your questions on how that money was spent.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that accounting. Richard, are you getting ready to say something?
Just looking at the agenda, we have, I believe, just moved to item 7D, correct?
That's correct.
Well, you weren't really finished with 7C. That you only hit one issue that is on 7 on that. Am I correct?
I think the recommendation on 7C was just to, the memo that went with that was just to approve the additional item of item 17 and to take that forward. It says the staff review the new item 17 on the attachment to provide comments and recommendations. So it wasn't on the unfinished items. It was only on adding item number 17.
Okay, so are we going to discuss that at some point? The others, there are a couple here. I look to item 13.
We've already discussed all those and they're all at the board at this point. Is that right, Rick?
Yes.
Okay. If that's, yeah, okay, that's true. All
So the
right,
board
thank you.
left off discussing some of those because of time. It was getting to be 5 o'clock. And some of them were rather involved conversations. Is that a, so comprehensive, yes.
I was there.
So that was the second meeting that the board went to 5 o'clock. So this, we're going to try to finish before 5 today. Tom?
So I'm looking, Gail, at this memorandum and I see 4.65 million. In the next page, I see 1.438 million. Which was the amount that PPRTA put toward this?
So PPRTA, again, of the 4.65 million that was authorized, has put forth $4,642,315.86. So if you look at the table on the front page of that memorandum,
Yep.
that shows where all those funds went.
So that's what PPRTA paid.
That's correct.
Okay, because there were several, 3 different trips here where each time it was said, no more, we will not ask for any more. And each time it was like $2 million, was 1.5, then 2, then 2.5, and now we end up with 4.6. So what is on the second page of that memorandum, the 1.438, what is that where it says PPRTA?
That is the same line item that's shown on that, the table on page 1 and the bottom row where it's the Kiewit. That's the same number, the 4 million. I'm sorry, the 438,957.96.
So that's just a subset of this one.
That's correct. And that's what I wanted to make sure that was clear, because with that table, I tried to summarize it in the table. And those top 5 rows, PPRTA paid for all those services with their contracts. On the actual construction contract that was performed by Kiewit, it had multiple funding sources in it. And that's what that second table on the second page shows.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So you okay, Richard? We're going to go on to 7D. Okay. I'm sorry. So any other questions on 7D, the Park Union Ped Bridge? And it's a beautiful bridge. I'll tell you, when you're driving up 25, that's a beautiful thing. So
$50 million worth of fee.
yeah, 15 million versus beauty, but it's so. Yeah. All right. Okay, so we'll move on. That's an information only item. 7E, City of Colorado Springs monthly change order. Any questions on that as you look through your packets? Anybody online? Okay, seeing none. 7F, El Paso County monthly change order and property acquisition. Any questions for Jennifer on that? Good job, people. Seeing none. Move on to 8A, which is a report of recent board actions. That is in your packet.
Are there any questions?
Any questions on that? When you don't have anything to do one afternoon, you too can come join the board meeting. All right, 8B. Rick, you want to cover any of that, or whoever's going to, Rick or Gail, or whoever's following that?
Well, we've already talked about this issue in detail. The issue is what is the board going to say at the public hearing, CDOT's public hearing on September 24 at the CDOT offices on Quail Lake Loop. And so the staff doesn't have a recommendation of what the board's public comment should be yet. I think that'll be generated probably with the help of the PPRTA attorney, Jennifer Ivy, in executive session next Wednesday, and then come out of executive session and talk about it in open session. So the two options are come up with public comments, let the board chair and or the board vice chair make those public comments at the September 24 public hearing, or plan B is talk about it at September 8. Go to the public hearing, the CDOT public hearing on the September 24, and then finalize public comments at the October board meeting, which is October 13, because the CDOT deadline is now October 15. So the board could make its public comments at the public hearing on September 24, or just submit them on or after October 13 with the deadline of October 15. So as I say, the staff does not yet have recommended comments. If we had those, we would have mentioned those to you today to see if you want to discuss them and make a recommendation of what the board's public comments should be next Wednesday. But the staff doesn't have any unless Gail and Jennifer want to propose anything.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything.
Tom?
I would suggest that they make the point that those affected should have insight and input into the model. The model is the key. If you get a bad model, you're going to get bad data.
Scott?
I would recommend that the city and county perhaps engage groups like ASCE, ITE, and ACEC. They have some professional lobbies that could perhaps be pulled together to speak towards the issues that this thing's creating.
Thank you, Scott. We'll take that in consideration. Just so you know, we're also working with PPRTA and PPACG and looking at this collectively as a region. So it's not just the individual entities as well.
Okay.
Okay, we'll closely follow that. Item HC is a report for member committees. I think I mentioned it a couple of meetings ago that I am on the Connect COS activity, Community Advisory Commission, or whatever it's the CAC, whatever that is. And also on the Platt Avenue corridor study that we approved for the city to do. Just to report out on those, they're going well. A good public participation in both of those. They've just finished with the Platt Avenue study. They've broken that whole corridor study from the far eastern side all the way into downtown into 4 groups that kind of correspond with what that road looks like downtown, in the old neighborhood east of Wasatch, and then the commercial group from Union out to Platt, and then to Academy, and then from Academy West, where it's more of a thoroughfare, limited access, each having different characteristics, each having different requirements, and in some cases restrictions. And so they've broken those down, some public input on each of those small, all of them have been by Zoom so far. The Connect COS is well attended. The facilitators and the contractors are doing a great job of addressing issues. They're looking at corridor studies, major thoroughfares, those kinds of things, and considering growth and doing all that. So nothing specific to report out, just that they're going well. I am participating in them. And if there's anything no voting or anything. There's been several, what do you call those things, Gail, when we're online and we questionnaire kind of things that we're online clicking on things to get feedback from the committee and stuff, and very creative in some of those questions and answers. So just wanted to let you know that they are progressing. There's some good information coming out of those, I think, in the end that we'll hear about. But just wanted to give you an update on how that's going. So. All right, in the last one, 8D, for some of our newer members, this quarterly report by the member governments, I kind of pull this out of our packet. This is a great reference to use if you're asked by any of your constituents or anybody about what the status of a project is or what's going on or what are you spending that money on or stuff. This is a great reference document to pull out and hang on to. It's done quarterly. The member governments do a fantastic job of putting this together. And so I just like to once again thank the member governments and their staffs for this very useful document. But for some of the newer folks, this is a great thing to kind of put aside if you needed to refer to something to somebody. So just caution you to or request that you keep that and look at it when you need to. Item 9, agenda topics next meeting. Anybody got any burning issues we need to talk about? Dave?
I just appreciate an update on the agenda next month on this Senate Bill 260 mess. I think that one we need to, for sure, we track that closely. That's a really pretty big deal.
Okay.
Obviously.
Yep, we can do that. Any communications by any of the members of the committee you want to share with other members of the committee? Ed?
But anyway, on your departure, for those that groups in the back, we just farm, so.
Thank you. Fresh produce, yes. And I'll just say publicly, Ed, what you do for the rescue mission and the stuff here is fantastic. So.
Here.
All right, any communication, anybody online that I overlook a hand or anything?
Hey, Jim, it's Brian West. Just
Brian.
just want to remind everyone that the homeless veteran stand down, the 23rd annual homeless veteran stand down is Tuesday, September 21st, First Baptist Church parking lot. And there's going to be about 70 tables and services being supplied to our veterans and a bunch of other services for our homeless to get them through the winter or hopefully get them into better situations.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for bringing that up.
Welcome.
All right, if there's nothing else, I hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Do I need to take a vote?
No.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your time.
Nay. Let's go another hour. Well, that's the craziest meeting.
What's that?
This is the craziest meeting. It's incredibly good news with the paratransit folks. And then I'm just astonished at the lunacy of that.